welcome to a lecture in which I'm going to focus on the issue of the literature review, as well as cover some of the key topics that seem to be coming up fairly regularly. I'll very briefly skip through the slides that I've produced for this and focus on the key moments where we seem to be slipping up a little bit. All right, I'll just bring up the key slide here. The purpose of a literature review basically is to provide a context for your subject. There shouldn't be a disconnect between what you write about in your literature review and the data that you collect and the recommendations or analysis that you do at the end of it. There needs to be a nice line that runs all the way between how you review the literature and where you get the data from and how you analyse it. Now, a lot of you are still a little bit confused about the distinction between literature review and secondary data. I have hammered on that on my second YouTube video, but I'll just briefly point out that these are two distinct areas of work that you're going to produce for your final assignment. The literature review provides the scholarly context, or in the case of practitioner literature, it provides the practitioner and the scholarly context for the particular project that you're engaging in. And what I do want you to think about here is just to realize that this kind of work that you're doing for this assignment in this subject is perfectly relevant for you in terms of your future. If you really think about it, your boss is one day going to come to you and say, look, I've been thinking about expanding into Western Australia or into Indonesia or into the Asia Pacific. Let's take the last one. I want to expand into Asia Pacific, and we're marine engineers, and I want you to find a country where the policy context of those countries will be favourable to our company, that we could expand our company into somewhere in the Asia Pacific. We want you to come up with a report recommending which country has the most favourable environment for our kind of business. And you'll go and hit newspapers, you'll go and hit magazines, you'll go and hit practitioner literature, and you'll also go on to the scholarly literature and try and find evidence to do with policy in relation to marine engineering in different countries. And you'll analyse that, and you'll come up with a report that provides a recommendation to your boss as to where he should expand his business into. Now, this is a very practical example of where this kind of work that you're doing in this particular project is of value to your future work. These kind of research questions come up all the time in medium, small, and large businesses. So it is very, very relevant. So what is a literature review? It's a detailed and justified analysis and commentary on the merits and faults of literature. So when I say merits and faults, this gives you an example of what we mean by critical thinking. And you'll notice that in the way we've specified the assignments, we've made a reference to critical thinking. So you actually have to compare different parts of the literature. You don't blindly grab it, read it, and spill it out. Apart from plagiarism issues, which I won't focus on today, your job is to evaluate, is this a good piece of evidence or is this a bad piece of evidence? So, for example, if you found an interesting article in one of the practitioner journals that simply stated Mr. Smith's opinion about it, would that be as valuable as a study conducted at Harvard University where they analysed 50 different companies in a methodical manner and found out the same thing that Mr. Smith talked about? Mr. Smith's evidence is interesting, but it's not as good as a nicely designed study conducted by a prestige university and presented in a peer-reviewed journal. Some of the kind of things you can do in terms of critical analysis and showing about the merits and faults is look for patterns in the literature. Does Smith agree with Jones, or does Smith disagree with Jones? So you could actually say, look, the literature tends to agree on X, Y, and Z, although there are some critics, notably this one, and this one, who don't agree with the general trend of the literature. Or Alternatively, all the British literature tends to agree that this is the case, but the American or Australian literature doesn't agree. Any kind of attempt to show that you've read broadly and seen patterns in the literature, that already equates to critical thinking. So it's about evaluating, or assessing what is in the literature. The purpose of the literature is to provide, is to identify gaps in the literature. So when you review the literature, you say, oh, it's beautifully covered, except for this little hole, and I'm going to fill that hole. Or it is to look for patterns. It's to show the current state of knowledge within a particular field, or to show why a particular topic is important within a particular context. You don't simply write literature reviews to show that you've read a lot and just list it in boring, read this, that's what it said, read that, that's what it said. You need to integrate it into an argument, and when I say argument, I don't mean in the normal, ordinary sense of the word. I mean, you need to integrate into a single storyline that talks about the topic in a consistent way. It should feel like it's connected to each other, as well as connected to your analysis and methods and research questions. It all has to, a perfect research paper has a single, coherent, glued together feel to it, not this and then that and then that and then that. It has to have a sequence, a string that draws it all together. Now, I won't talk too much about primary, secondary and tertiary data, but primary sources include the literature review, the academic peer-reviewed journal articles or conference proceedings or theses, where they've actually gone and done the actual research that you're talking about. But it can also include things like patents, newspapers, business catalogues and policies. That can be primary sources. Secondary sources, which we do generally encourage, less, as in we don't encourage them so much, as things like textbooks and abstracts and monographs, or news or bulletin boards or things like that. And tertiary sources even less so. Focus on primary sources in doing your literature review. Now, one important part of doing the literature review, and I'm not going to focus too heavily on going through these sequences, is making sure that the whole topic that you've chosen is feasible to do. And feasible can go in either direction. If you have not enough literature to actually do the job, or you've got too much literature that you simply can't make sense of it all, both of these are a little bit of a problem. If you haven't got enough literature, there is a solution for you. You can't find anything literature. First of all, you can contact me. I can help you find it. It's probably that you're using the wrong search terms. But another way of assisting with this process, and where I may help you if you say, oh, Olaf, I can't find any literature on this, is you could say, okay, there is no literature in this specific area, but broadening it out. So let's say HR challenges, performance management challenges in the fishing trade. You can't find anything on marine-based HR performance management challenges, but the challenges of doing that kind of thing on a boat. Let's say that was your topic. The problem with your topic is it's too small, but you could still find literature looking about performance management at a very broad level. Or you could take it a little bit narrower and say performance management in difficult circumstances, on mining sites or nighttime performance management. And then say, okay, this is what the literature says in this area. Now let's have a look at performance management on boats. It's never been done before. There's a gap in the literature. So that's one solution. You can't find enough literature, broaden out and look at it from a bigger perspective. If it's got too much material in it, that's actually probably more a sign that there's a problem here. If there is too much material, you probably shouldn't be doing the study at all because it's already been done. Or secondly, your topic's too big. and you need to narrow the topic down, maybe not down to the fishing boat level, but something similar. You have to actually take it from that broad global level and focus it onto something tighter and smaller. This process becomes easier as you get more experience. But, for example, your boss is not going to say to you, Olaf, I want to expand my business. I don't know where I want to expand it to, and I don't know why I want to expand it, but I want to expand it. What are the risks of expanding my business? He's unlikely to come up to you with a project like that. It's not a good project. It's not a good question for your boss to ask you. He hasn't even thought about the issue himself. He's asking you to solve a problem he doesn't really know what the problem is. So the problem with having too much material is often related to having a poorly defined project. Cut it down, shrink it until it's tighter and smaller, and then try again. And this is the issue of you can also cut back when you've got too much material by, restricting your research parameters to only English language, only in the last 10 years, only refereed journals. That's another way of cutting back your sprawling literature review. The issue of finding the right keywords, I don't think I can help very easily in the terms of this particular tutorial or this particular lecture. But feel free to contact me if you're struggling with finding the right keywords. But it's important that, as I said before, in relation to critically analyzing or doing a critical literature review, that you look at some of the things like, is the data old, for example? That's the issue of currency. Is it specific to your area? Is it good quality? And the issue of authority is, is this person an expert in the field, acknowledged? Is it heavily cited, for example, as a peer-reviewed journal? You can find that in Google Scholar, how often an article has been cited, or whether you can actually have a look at, is this journal prestigious? Is it the Harvard Journal of Business, etc., etc.? How relevant is it? Is it too basic or too technical? And is it, a good, solid, objective study, or is it more an opinion piece? These are ways that you can evaluate the literature. Now, in terms of where this comes, I wanted to say a few words also about the place of the literature review in relation to your project, which, as I've said several times throughout the course so far, and on the Moodle site repeat fairly heavily, this issue of secondary data and how it fits. So basically, as I said before, you need to create a context that can start very broad, HR issues or performance management in general, and then start to focus about performance management in difficult conditions, and then focus on performance management in this particular difficult condition. And that comes to the point of, at the end of the literature review, you'll say, okay, this is my particular focus, this is my particular problem, and this is how I'm going to tackle it. When it comes to methodology, I'll briefly say, and I'll repeat this a little bit later, methodology is really providing a recipe for how you are going to analyse the question that you've introduced at the end of the literature review. So for your assignment 1, we do request that you do an analysis, that you do present a description of how you're planning to do the project. It's kind of like a roadmap. We're not going to just say, look, it wouldn't be satisfactory there, or it wouldn't be wise for you to say, okay, I've reviewed the literature a little bit here, I found a bit of a gap, and I'm going to look into this issue. And to do so, I'm going to look at qualitative, I'm going to find some secondary data on the internet. That's, I'll look at that, and I'll say, where on the internet? How will you do that? Is it realistic that you're going to find such data? And if I were to judge that and say, well, look, you haven't put any effort into finding out, is this project feasible? Can it be done or not? And if the answer to that question, and you haven't defined it, is I don't think so, then you're not going to get as good mark. So, and also you're going to struggle with assignment 2 because you've set yourself up for failure. You've created a project and you have no idea whether it's feasible or not. Now, I think as you work through, I will say this, as you work through and do reading, there is a tendency which students even at PhD level do, which is not a good tendency, is they'll find some reasonably interesting articles on Google Scholar or in the library databases, and they'll print them out, and they'll take them home, and they'll have a coffee, and they might highlight and marker up with yellow highlighter some interesting sections. And then they'll put them aside, and then they'll start with the next article, and then they'll eventually come to the writing up stage, and they've got this whole heap of printouts with yellow markings on it. And first of all, what they haven't done is taken any citations down. They can work them out and retype them all by just looking at the thing, a Journal of Organizational Behavior. It's volume 25, number 2. This is all a lot of work, and frankly, it's a lot of unnecessary work. I'm just going to bring this up and bring up Google Scholar and look at this is the search that I've just done. You can actually find under sites here while you're doing it. Instead of just print out and do this, grab the citations at the same time and paste them into your document, your Word document where you're going to do your final job. Remember that just because it says APA there doesn't mean it is perfect APA style. I can see, for example, in this case, there is nowhere where this particular person, where was Psychology Press? New York, London, France? We've got no idea, and you should know. So you'll need to actually find where that book was printed, and that needs to be included for it to be proper APA style. So what I would do is I would open them, I would take notes while you're working. I'm not saying that that's absolutely essential, it just will save you a lot of time. I would take notes straight off the PDF. So I would open up a PDF and I'd copy and paste elements. Let's say this was a PDF, I'd copy it and paste it into a Word document and keep running notes as you're going through. It does save you a lot of time, and it does help you avoid accidental plagiarism if you include the reference. Every time you grab something, you paste your APA reference next to it or near it. And I use a little code, by the way. If I copy and paste something onto a document and it's straight out plagiarism, as in it's something that's quoted word for word from the original source, the PDF, I will bold it or color it yellow or use some other simple code to say that it has been stolen from someone, and I need to acknowledge that later. Now, when you do, when you're in the process of pasting notes together, you can have 2 Word documents. You can have one Word document where you've got all your notes and another Word document where you start your essay. And you can start off your essay by just having some very basic headers in there, executive summary, abstract, or introduction, or methods section, and you can even break your introduction, which effectively is your literature review, into a number of different sections, definitions, etc., etc. Break them up and then start pasting notes into the different sections with the color coding to stop yourself from plagiarizing. You should start doing this very early on. Don't wait until you've got a pile of PDFs or a pile of printed documents with yellow highlighters all over it, and then I'll write with 4 days to go, start writing this. Get into it early. Remember, you don't have to read everything about a broad topic area. You can focus, and we're not expecting, like the world's best literature review. We're expecting you to show some discrimination. That is, we're expecting you to understand this is a very good quality paper, and this is not. one quick way, so let's say performance management crisis. Now, performance management in the, I'll try under pressure. Yeah, it does come. Performance management, safety, climate. Notice the ones that are cited heavily, they tend to be the better and more classic works in the field. If you go to page 10 of this, you'll start to see the numbers are starting to drop. Still not really dropping that much, but if you go further and further, you'll see less and less cited. It's proving a liar of me, because I'm still getting quite high citation marks. I'm surprised, actually, probably because this is such a broad field with 11,000 results. But if it was, let's say, 500 results, you'd notice it very quickly starts to drop off the amount of citations. So use the works that have been more heavily cited and that are more squarely inside the field that you want, not obscure works that come from the very far side of a particular topic and you're drawing them in, pushing it a bit, Try and use ones that are clearly about the topic you're trying to talk about, and use the heavier cited work. So we're not expecting you to read 50, 500 works. We would prefer that you just get 10 or 15 or 20 of the best works for it. And being able to discriminate between good and bad, really relevant, not so relevant, is part of what we look for in critical thinking, that key word again. Try to avoid using your own thoughts. I first write the whole thing up and then find the literature to back up what I've written. So try to draw on the literature to come up with your project, or to come up with your hypotheses. Don't come up with your own hypotheses and then find literature to support it. It's not generally as good an idea. You do need to be very careful not to use your own opinion too much. I mean, you're allowed to say things like, this particular paper is a relatively poor quality paper because it has been published in an obscure journal and has never been cited. That's not an opinion. I mean, it is your analysis of that paper, but it's true that the journal is a poor quality journal. I'll show you how you can find that out. If you go to Google Scholar, Journal of Business. Sorry, I got that wrong. Metrics, here it is. Under Metrics, Journal Business. Okay. Now these are all these are all high H5 index. So these are all well-cited journals. If journals are very obscure, so Journal Indian Business, try that. You'll notice the H5 index is a lot smaller. So these journals are much less credible than these journals, which are much higher H5 and H5 median indexes. So it's a way of, that's an objective fact. The fact that something hasn't been cited, for example, we go to Google Scholar. These have been heavily cited, but if that number had 0, there was nothing in there, that would be a fact. It would be a fact that you've drawn attention to, no problem. So it's not your opinion, it's an objective fact that you've done through research and thinking on your part. Now, let me just see, I'm not going to talk too much about plagiarism. Just beware that rewriting something, and that's, so for example, substituting, generating trademark parity, so generating brand equity, is basically substituted creating for generating, brand for trademark, equity for parity, building for constructing, strong for tough, brand for trademark. In order to get around plagiarism censors, this person has attempted to just substitute word for word. And I've had hilarious results in in student assignments where they've just used a thesaurus to replace words, and they haven't understood those words properly, and it's created basically something very funny, which is not what you're looking for at all. Now, remember when you're doing some searches, so part of your assignment, and we'll go back to the assignment here, and we'll go back to here. For the first assignment, which is the 40%, you've got this whole section on identifying and exploring your profession. Now, this is relatively an easy section. We've provided on Moodle a whole lot of journal articles and other sources talking about the nature of the profession. It's general stuff. If you want to find specific stuff for your particular profession, you'll need to find it in, for example, Google Scholar, profession, engineering, and find some material, an orientation of a professional engineer. Find material that talks specifically about the profession, the profession of engineering. Remember, if you use quote marks, you restrict the number of findings you will find, but they do tend to, if you use them smartly, you will focus more quickly on specific material. A mature profession of software engineering. That's an interesting one. The US competitors in the profession. Equations don't change, but the profession of engineering does. It's only poorly cited, but it's getting closer to the topic. And one other way you can find stuff that's particularly suited to you is you choose that and you put it in the title. We'll want the words profession and engineering will appear in the title. And you'll find some better quality articles because it's more specifically about the topic you want. So that's a way that you can hone in a little bit to what your assignment is about. So we want you to identify and explore your future profession, which is, if you're in management, engineering management, talk about engineering management or management, etc., etc. Identify what it is, that's simple, explore it, and talk about the nature of the profession and whether your profession qualifies as a profession, which ways it is a profession, which ways it isn't a profession. So that's the critical element of that. Produce a critical review of your understanding what it means to become a profession in your future profession. So you will talk in this section about one of the characteristics of a profession, for example, is that there is limited membership. You need to have certain qualifications and you have to jump through a particular hoop that relates to becoming a professional in the area of marketing or management or HR or engineering, and talk about, for example, the membership requirements of the membership of the organization of engineers or software engineers or marketing professionals or HR professionals. You'll talk about how to become a professional and what elements of membership, what elements of ethics and other characteristics of a profession in relation to your profession. And then we come to the part that I'm sure you're all worried about, your project proposal. And basically you're foreshadowing where you're going to go. You're setting this up, and this is quite a big, even it's 40% is obviously a lot of your project, a lot of this course value, and it is a big project. It's at this particular part of your assignment it takes quite a big deal. You need to come up with a clear and concise working title that gives us a strong sense of where you're going. Don't just make it HR, human resource management in the world. That would be far too broad. We need something much more specific about what your particular topic is about. You can even have a question mark in it. What is the role of human resource management in the job market in South Australia? Or whatever. Specifying where you're going to do it and what element of the field of human resource management you're going to be analysing. Then we need a background and definition of the issue, including a justification of why it's crucially relevant to your profession. And, performance management, for example, you'll need to come up with some material which says that performance management is one of the key predictors, and you'll need to have scholarly material to back it. Performance management is one of the key predictors of happy and productive workforce. Source. Come up with source. And performance management is particularly critical in difficult conditions. A source. You'll have to come up with evidence for it. So you need to justify why you chose to come up with this using the academic literature. And then you can talk about your aims and objectives, your research questions in particular. You'll conduct your critical literature review, which will just be the beginning, and you'll be able to use this material in assignment number 2. So this is just your early work, highlighting the gaps in the literature. That says, okay, when I say highlighting the gaps in the literature, I'm hoping and expecting that you'll be looking at a subject that hasn't been done to death before. And by to death, I mean material that has been already answered. We don't need you to answer research questions that have already been answered. So try and narrow your topic to a point where it's interesting and useful and important for your field. And then we need to have a taste with how you're proceeding, where you're going to get your data from, how you're going to analyze it. So it's not just going to be pure speculation on your part. You need to have some real plans in place. Having milestones and a Gantt chart, while I'm not that obsessed with that, that helps you, because it helps you to clearly state, I'm not just dreaming, by the 3rd of May I'm going to have done this, and by the 18th of May I'm going to have done that. And it will keep you on track in preparing your project. It's part of what your boss would expect you to do if you were out in the real world. They'd say, look, can you have a draft of your report by 5th of February for me, and then I'd need the final report by the 18th of February, or whatever. This is the real world. This is what people will expect. I'm not a big fan of Gantt charts, and if you want to present your data or your plan for it, you can do it with something similar to a Gantt chart, but effectively an objective measure of showing how you're planning to progress through the project. Well, that's what we're looking for there. Okay. I think that's the main issues that I wanted to talk about. Remember, if you have any questions, please get in touch, particularly in relation to searching for material on your topic. I'm happy to help you find some search terms that will make this a little bit easier. But good luck, and stay in touch with your on-campus tutors and lecturers. I just saw some findings actually from a research project that I have been involved with, which I'll just briefly share with you. This is a real-world research project that has real relevance to you. Students who attend lectures are far more likely to get good results than students who don't. Far more likely. And that works on a grand scale. So attending lectures, not just attending tutes, in fact attending tutes is less well related to good results than attending lectures. A lot of students think, I'll just attend the tute, I don't need the lecture. But those students who do attend the lectures do tend to do better in topics. So that's something for you to think about, and all the best. Talk to you soon.